Adobe Research, and conducted visiting research at Oxford and worked on machine learning for particle physics in CERN. His team helps create transparency tools to detect mis and disinformation on social internet and has won grants and awards from Google Research, AWS, the Wikimedia Foundation, and the NYC Media Club. Welcome to the event, sir. Oops.
Thanks. Just double checking. Am I audible? Is my audio clear?
Yes, sir. Perfectly audible.
Awesome.
So,
Cool.
maybe an introduction from your side. Like I did just read an abstract. So.
Sounds good. So hi everyone. I'm just about done with my PhD at New York University. I'm in the data science PhD program. My research focuses mainly on identifying bad actors on social networks and figuring out better ways to kind of limit the influence of online harms, online disinformation, online influence operations, and like these coordinated networks of actors. It kind of accidentally happened to be a relevant direction because lots of people are talking about online social networks these days. There's a lot of talk in the context of generative AI. There's a lot of talk in the context of regulating social networks. So, what can the government do to better protect users? But in general, my background has been in computer engineering. So, I was an undergrad in India at a college in Mumbai called DJ Sangvi College of Engineering. And then I moved to Switzerland to work on machine learning and particle physics research at an organization called CERN, which is the European Center for European Organization for Nuclear Research. And then from there, I kind of jumped into my PhD. So I kind of skipped over the master's part of things and ended up in the PhD program. And about 4 years in, I'm ready to go out of the PhD program and hopefully start my postdoc at Boston University and MIT in the next couple of months. So that's my background. Hopefully that gives you enough context on who I am, where I come from, what I do, and what I'm planning to talk about.
Wow, so that's an amazing, really, that's an amazing background, really, like hearing the more in-depth part of it. DJ Sangvi, so you're a Mumbai citizen. That's really great to hear. How was Mumbai treating you, honestly? Leaving
Oh, I'm an
Mumbai.
out and out Mumbaikar.
Oh, okay.
I mean, to be fair, I don't miss Mumbai a lot because I ended up in New York where also by coincidence, I have a lot of my second grade and fourth grade and eighth grade friends from school. So like a bunch of people I spent most of my life with ended up alongside me in the same city.
So home away from home in a way.
Home away from home.
Okay, that's great. So guys, this is gonna be a really interactive session. We'll be asking sir a couple of questions. Then obviously everything will be open to you guys to ask the questions as well. So I'll just start with a few questions, and obviously we can go through how do I put this? Improvise our way throughout it. So the first question, can you so you have told us about your past as what you have studied and what you have worked, but in detail, how has your job been in the field of data science and machine learning? Like how are you putting everything together? Like when you have talked your abstract says that you have done things that are related to mis and disinformation. That includes machine learning, but how does data science come into play?
So I think a lot of these terms are kind of interchangeably used in
Yeah.
different places to describe similar things. For me, what I mean by using data science is tools from data analytics, data management, machine learning, artificial intelligence. Data science to me is like an umbrella term that encompasses all of these things in the pursuit of applications to my area of influence, which my area of interest, which is social networks. So for me, I came in with an understanding of systems, having deployed production machine learning systems at CERN, did an internship at
Guys, I request everyone to stay on mute for now. Okay, I'll just mute everyone so that yeah. Thank you. Sorry, sir.
all good. Yeah, so what I was saying was data science to me is this umbrella term that encompasses all of the kinds of applied algorithmic research, the kind of production machine learning systems I built out. An amalgamation of all of those things is data science to me. So I work on building tools to understand social networks. So if you take the example of, I can take one from my current research, which is Twitter slapped these warning labels on top of a bunch of tweets saying, "Oh, this is potentially misinformation," or like this content is not has been known to be misleading, stuff like that. Um, on the outside, to us, it's like, okay, they stuck a label on some of these tweets, but we didn't really measure in like we didn't have ways to measure the causal effects of this. Like, did this actually reduce engagement with these tweets? Did it make people tweet less? Did it actually reduce visibility? Like, what happened because of these things? Are these measures actually effective? What are they even doing? And as people who are primary affected parties, or users, as users of these platforms, do we actually understand what the effects are on ourselves when these platforms take such steps? So, and I should add that I actually worked on Twitter, but not on this project. So I worked independently on this kind of project, trying to understand the effects of warning labels. And then I ended up at Twitter as an intern, working on better classifiers for mis and disinformation, specifically in like domains like public health and civic integrity. So civic integrity basically means election related stuff, civic related stuff. I'm sure you all have studied history and civics, so I don't have to define civics for you. But yeah, that's the kind of application area I try to identify problems in and try to solve them.
That's amazing, sir. So one second. Yeah. So given this, how would I put this? I won't even put this as a roller coaster because it kind of seems like you were headed in one direction throughout your studies. I guess from starting from DJ Sangvi, like what did you know that you were gonna do this particular thing? Because I know DJ Sangvi is for engineering, so I study nearby only. So how did you go from, I guess, engineering to this kind of a field?
Oh, to be honest, I had no idea how, like, there was no plan as such. I had no idea I wanted to do a PhD. For
Okay,
me, it was a series of decisions that accidentally ended up being okay, I should do a PhD. So in
okay,
DJ Sangvi, one thing I kind of learned very early on was you have to step outside the classroom to learn about the real world, because that is the experience that I don't think any college environment is going to be able to provide to the extent you will get if you step outside it. So from that standpoint, I ended up interning at 4 to 6 different places, from small startups to like large startups to I ended up at IIT Bombay for a summer. I ended up at CERN interning initially, and then I got a full-time offer there. So I use the college environment to my advantage in the sense where I think it's pretty clear that a lot of students don't study during the semester and they study before the exams.
yeah.
And that's fine. That's as long as you pass your exams, I think that's a checkbox that you're getting. But then that's not, you're not really using your time
Mm.
optimally. And to be fair, I was one of those students. I was very much last day, and I've always been like a study on the last day before the exam kind of person. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that don't waste the time you end up saving by not studying for the semester or like studying less during the semester. So for me, that time became internships. So I ended up learning on the kind of during the semester, and then during your exams, you take a break. And obviously, you want your grades to be high enough that they aren't an obstacle.
Yeah,
But grades aren't the only thing that will get you through the door in a lot of places. So you want to focus on your extracurriculars, specifically internships or research, additional things beyond your grades.
I
So
guess a
that's
lot of students want to hear that because we are studying at an IITM degree, and obviously CGPA matters to us, but then again, it's not everything, right?
exactly. So for me, to answer your question, DJ Sangvi led to the internship at CERN. The internship at CERN led to a job at CERN. Job at CERN led to this realization that a master's is not going to give me enough time to actually study. And what I wanted to do was have a formal sort of wrap up my education. And a master's is typically designed as a degree that gets you a job, but most of that process is spent looking for that job and not actually taking hard courses or like spending a lot of time on projects related to the courses, because it's just a logistics issue. You are moving into a whole new country for the most part. You're going to have to deal with so many different things on your own, and on top of that you want to add like I also want to study like 5 hard courses in this semester. It's physically impossible for someone to do that. And some of the smartest people I know gave me that advice that if you really want to study, like try to go for a PhD. If you want to do a master's, that's great, but like bear in mind that it's not going to give you all of the freedom that on paper it seems to give you. And that's completely fine. Like getting a job is great. It's again like a whole repetition of learning on the job as opposed to learning in the classroom. So there's no wrong answer there. But for me, because I wanted to pursue more kind of educational pursuits, the PhD seemed like the right decision. And I very accidentally chanced into a PhD program at a decent institute. So I ended up getting lucky. I think there's no other logical explanation there.
Okay. So, this question just popped up in the chat and it kind of seems relevant. Isn't master's the prerequisite for PhD? So,
Not necessarily. So that's what a lot of us don't know off the go. But I knew because one of the students who was my senior in DJ Sangvi got into a PhD program directly after undergrad. So he actually
okay.
went to either UT Dallas or Texas A&M, I forget now, but he went to university directly after his undergrad and that was when I realized, oh, this is possible. So do your own research, try to ask people, attend these kinds of seminars to learn more about, oh, this is possible. And a PhD is a fully funded position. So you're not
Yeah.
paying any money for the degree. In fact, if you're paying money for a PhD, don't do the PhD. That's not a good degree. So it's a fully funded offer, 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years in some places. In most places, it will include a component that serves as your master's if you're not explicitly done a master's before. So I had coursework during the first 2 years of my PhD. I was doing coursework towards my master's. And at some point, I implicitly got a master's degree. Some places explicitly give it to you, some places don't. And anyway, that varies. But for me, that was how it worked.
Okay. Um, so I guess that answers the question that how do you get into PhD directly from an undergrad? So
Yep.
moving on, considering the amount of projects that you have done, the amount of internships you have done, so what at what point did you find it challenging to kind of deal with the situation, since social media is a vast domain, obviously, and in particularly when I talk about it, identifying dis and misinformation points. So where did you find it challenging to you know get get through this obstacle?
So one of the main challenges when it comes to mis and disinformation is actually defining them. Like who is to say someone has the right definition of fake news, for example? You say fake news, I just say, oh, that's one party's side and the other party's side is not being accounted for, or something like that, right? Like COVID vaccines do not work. That is not an untrue statement, because at some point maybe COVID vaccines did not work, but now they work. So it's a whole question of who defines what truth is, and most of the times we have no answer. Like most of the times people who define truth, they also don't know what truth is, or people can be wrong. The WHO was incorrect or inaccurate a couple of times, so it's not like the WHO knows everything. So especially in times of sort of civil and political volatility, public health and civic volatility, so like early stages of elections where information is coming in very quickly and we don't have a way to verify it, or during early stages of COVID when again information is coming in very quickly, we don't have a way to verify it, people tend to like have a problem with fact checking. So it's not a completely scalable and completely efficient way to be decide what truth is and what information you can trust online. So what the research I came in to do ended up becoming was ways to detect networks that promote inauthentic information, so or unreliable information in coordinated manners. So what I'm saying is, if you and I share something in within 5 seconds of each other once, maybe that's because we just saw the same thing. Maybe you and I share some other stuff within 2 minutes. Maybe IIT Madras had a post and we both shared it. But if you and I share something 50 different times within 2 or 3 seconds of each other, that kind of is a clear indicator that someone's controlling these accounts. Like this
Yeah.
can't be authentic.
Yeah.
So answering that kind of question at scale is what became the focus of the kind of systems I was trying to understand and research. And eventually we ended up building out products in this space to do those kind of things. So we identified, like, when I talk about it, it sounds very simple. But
Yeah.
when you do it for millions of different accounts in real time, that becomes very hard to do. So we built a system to do exactly that at scale for Twitter, and the Sunday Times kind of worked with us on this. They used the project, so we got a bunch of visibility around it, and we got some small grants. We got a grant award from Wikimedia. We got an award from Google. So, and this is all student driven. So all of the students I work with come from DJ Sangvi and Thadumal Shani and some IITians and some people in the US, some people in India, some people in London. Like all of us are globally placed students working together to build these kinds of systems. So the research I ended up starting out became like a thing that we now do every week. We meet and we pursue these kinds of projects on the side. So yeah, that's.
Um, okay, that's so is it only focused on your research? Was only focused on like misleading information, or was it more like did you cover something like inappropriate information or something that is not really meant for the public? Did it
So there are
cover that as
different, yeah, there are different directions you can take with respect to the types of content you want to analyze. So one direction we looked at was toxic content.
well?
Now,
Okay.
under toxic content, you can have insults, you can have abuses, you can have harassment, you can have hate, you can have, like, there are different categories of these things. And then you can have like human verified toxicity, or you can have machine learning classifiers to give toxicity scores to content. Multiple directions to explore there. The second thing is you can look at different platforms, right? We started out with Twitter, but then we realized that there are so many social platforms out there. So one of the teams of students that I'm working with, they're looking at YouTube. Another team joined us. They started looking at WhatsApp and like how can we actually collect WhatsApp data locally
Hmm.
to understand, like, on a user's device, how do we analyze this kind of information, the content they are sharing. Another team started looking at this platform called Truth Social, which is something that Donald Trump launched as a Twitter alternative after he got banned.
Okay.
So it's like there are so many platforms out there that we need more people to come together and study these things. But it's also really hard to do because you need to be a little technically strong to understand what data collection means for each of these platforms. Do that centrally, build a cloud-based system to do this. So over the couple of years, like as I was doing this research, I was also teaching on the side. So uh, uh, that kind of teaching was independent of NYU. So I was just teaching random students who I was as part of a student organization I founded when I was an undergrad at DJ Sangvi. So we kind of grew out, and then Google funded us to launch a machine learning course. So we taught that machine learning course. It was, and all of these materials are online. So you can go, I can drop some links later, but it, all of this was meant to be public material to train more people, especially Indian students, like give them a pathway to contribute to such kinds of projects. So if you're interested, I can, yeah, I'll share some links afterwards for people on the call. But that was the idea. Like I wanted to do research, but I also wanted to share, like, this is what I'm learning,
Yeah.
this is how to do research, this is, you can do this too. If I could do something, anyone else can do it. That was the motivation.
That will be actually a good thing to share, because a lot of us here are maybe they are entering this domain for the first time, or maybe they're already in this domain as working professionals, but obviously at some point we do need help figuring out how to do things the right way considering the current situation throughout the world. Coming to that, when we talk about data science, now obviously as this degree states BS in data science and programming, and it allowed people from various fields to come in. Not everyone was an expert in programming languages, not everyone was an expert in data science, and obviously not every student is an expert when you start off in junior college or school. So how was it for you tackling that, learning new programming languages, learning new tools?
So for me, that was a very interesting process because that was very friends driven.
Okay.
as opposed to like a college driven process. So a lot of things happened because I had two of my friends in undergrad. We were like a trio. We worked on all our projects and stuff together. So I learned Django, for example, at a hackathon, just because
Okay.
they all wanted to use Django. Django is like a Python, a framework written in Python, or a framework built around Python that can be used for web development and a bunch of other things. But the idea for us was we use Django to build web apps really quickly for hackathons. That's really useful. And so for me, the learning process was like if someone suggests something new, you kind of have to learn it. It's a hackathon. So the process was find an application and learn stuff that you need in order to execute that application. So you won't learn everything about every single language out there. You will learn just enough to actually execute what you want to do. And that turned out to be very effective for me because I didn't get into this rabbit hole of I need to understand everything about this language. That takes days to months to years. But I knew enough to build a blog in Django. I knew enough to build a web app in Django. And that process can be done really quickly if you have people who already know the language working with you, or if you have like a pointed goal and you can ask the right questions about it. So first thing you ask is how do I build a home page in Django? Second thing you ask is how do I build a database in Django? How do I connect this to a database? I should be more precise. The third thing you ask is, okay, like what kind of HTML pages can I use? Like, can I use templates out of the box and incorporate that into my web app? And then the fourth thing, okay, so how do I deploy this? Okay, so when a user comes in, how do I build a login functionality? So in essence, like having those applications is really useful to learn something new for me. So that's the process I've always stuck with. Even when I was doing research, I wanted to do something new, like have an end goal in mind, and then you try to find a path to that end goal. Because if you don't have that end goal, you're just wandering around. And I don't know how much of it I would retain if I was just wandering around. Which is not to say it's wrong. It's completely fair to do that, but it's very hard to show that you know something if you've just been wandering around and you don't have an end product to show someone external that, oh, I built something, I know this language. That's a much easier thing to do than say, I know this language, just test me. So yeah.
Okay. So technically, being around people, working with your peers kind of helped you get into that zone of learning new things. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. So what are so you learned the Django, you learned quite many machine learning tools. Do you want to give more details about certain particular tools that you used for your projects, which were really helpful?
Sure. So for a lot of my machine learning projects, I use PyTorch, which is a Python-based language that Facebook built out a couple of years ago. PyTorch was useful to me because as a prototyping language, it was very fast and easy to sort of understand because it was a Pythonic style of coding. So for me, the nice thing was PyTorch has a very nice ecosystem around it. So it's not just PyTorch that you get to use, but everyone has built libraries in PyTorch. So if you want to use graph neural networks, there is a graph neural networks library written in PyTorch. If you want to kind of do, I guess, scalable deployment and inference, like use pre-trained models, there are pre-trained models available in PyTorch. So a pre-trained model is something where someone else gives you a model that is trained to do X task, like prediction of true or false information when you're given a piece of text. Leave aside all of the false positives, but just if you have a task where it says predict this is fake news, yes or no, and you have a model already trained on it, that's really useful because then you don't have to do the training from scratch by yourself, and you can probably fine tune it or make some changes in that model, use a smaller data set, and additionally tune it to give you the results that you need. Yeah, I mean, machine learning is typically very bad at doing these kinds of things, but I'm leaving that aside for now and explaining like here is why PyTorch was useful to me as a system. There are a lot of tutorials available online. There are entire courses that are built around PyTorch. So all of those things are very trivial to kind of find online. And so it's a good way to get into a new tool, especially when there is easily available support around it. So yeah, for data science, according to PyTorch, a couple of, I guess, more complex things I kind of avoided that, but cloud-based stuff. So this doesn't come up very much when you're a student, and it's very rare that you would have to use Google Cloud or AWS or something as a student, um, primarily because it is paid stuff. So it's not easy to kind of get into the whole system. But I did use it for a couple of projects when I was in undergrad. There are API endpoints for Google Cloud. I think they had a Cloud Vision API. So we used it for object classification. So that was useful to easily build, prototype, and deploy a certain project that we had we called it Imagination. I don't know, I probably still have it on my GitHub, but yeah, the basically like cloud-based API endpoints are also really useful when you want to quickly deploy machine learning stuff. And you don't want to build your own models from scratch for every single problem that you have at hand. So yeah, some experience of that came in and really helped me out.
So that's like, yeah, there are some important tools that obviously people in this domain really need to know. So in your experience, what are the important considerations when you're building a robust and scalable software product in the field of data science? Like whatever projects you have done, like what do you have to really take into consideration? Something that you
I
can't miss
think
out.
I think one of the things to understand very early on is some of the math that goes into this. As long as you understand the basics of, for example, algorithms like backpropagation or gradient descent, you are very well set up to learn about more complex stuff down the line when you actually need it. So there are some general things that you should know when going into the field of machine learning that really help you out, and these are two of them. In other things I would say is having some experience building very small projects. So for example, knowing how to build a web app or knowing how to build like documentation and like generate documentation and deploy it online. So Sphinx or something like that. Knowing how to write good README files, knowing how to create a Python package and make it pip installable. Like these are things adjacent to your primary role, but it really like helps you spotlight the kind of work you're doing when it actually comes down to it. So I guess these are all boilerplate and not actually answering your question. But it's really helped me out because when I was at CERN, I could easily build up documentation around the projects I was doing. When I participated in hackathons, I could easily write nice README files and build nice presentations around it. When I was deploying software, like knowing how to build a library in Python with C++ bindings or C++ extensions, as it was called, it was really useful for me. And being comfortable with the command line and systems stuff in general is incredibly helpful, I think, in any sort of computer science related role you go in, because all of it has to do with the command line. So what is bash, what is the shell, how do you do some sort of bash scripting, what are like some common commands in the Linux shell, how do you search through files, so on and so forth. Like those are very mundane things that no one tells you about, but end up being crucial to almost every role you go into. And they're never, almost never explicitly discussed. They're just assumed that you will know it, so you actually knowing it is very useful beforehand. But again, repeat your question if I didn't actually get to the crux of it, because I was talking around a lot.
No, like, yeah, it did help in a way because you did answer, how do I put this, in a more general manner, which was, I guess, answerable to help everyone. So I actually wanted to move on to certain participant questions. Guys, if you have any questions, we'll answer those and then we'll get back to the set of questions that we want to ask. I can get a raise of hands. You guys can speak up and ask your questions. If I can get a raise of hands.
Sounds good. I should add like a couple of questions have been asking things around PhD and where I'm at and what I'm doing. So I will reiterate. I'm currently at New York University. I'm wrapping up my PhD. So in the next 2 months, ideally, I will graduate. After that, I'm starting a postdoctoral staff position. So postdoctoral staff means you are still doing research. You are not a professor, but rather a sort of a higher order research assistant. So more than a PhD, less than a professor, that kind of role, where you get to focus on writing up research primarily. That will be my role. So that is at Boston University, and I'm also an affiliate with a group at MIT. So that is my position essentially. So yeah, and I got an internship in CERN originally from India. Just CERN has an application program for called Open Lab for IT students and elect students. I forget the requirements now, but you can look up CERN Open Lab. I honestly do not know how to get into an MIT for a PhD because I didn't get into MIT for a PhD. I will share some thoughts about whether you really want to get into MIT for a PhD, because a lot of times you think you want to go to the best institute, but you also realize there is an immense pressure that comes with going to that institute, because when you're in a classroom where everyone else is better than you in terms of some degree or the other, some metric or the other, you kind of don't feel comfortable in that classroom. At least that was the case for me. Like I wouldn't have been probably smart enough to pursue a PhD at MIT just from a pure theoretical intelligence perspective, because I didn't have the right background. So it took me a while to get to that background. So if you're just thinking of like, I want to go to the best institute and that will make my life better, no, that's actually not the case. In fact, it can arguably make your life worse. And there is research that backs this, saying the people who are like at the bottom of the class at Harvard are less happy than people who are top of the class at a lower ranked university. So you would be happier as long as you're like better off in your class among a better peer group, rather than just trying to optimize for a dumb metric like university ranking. And I'm not saying going to MIT is a bad thing at all. It's great, but just bear in mind that there are a lot of things that you have to consider beyond just institute rank, especially the fit for you. Like you have to be comfortable actually delivering in that kind of environment. So yeah, just think about that when you're thinking about where I want to go, what I want to pursue, what kinds of people do I want to surround myself with, and yeah, that's all.
So basically, courses and detailed research of admission methods is not the only way to get into a big fancy university. You need to research a lot more people. Okay. So the first question from Salman Nidhi. You can speak up if for your question.
Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. Actually, I have joined the foundation right now on May term. Actually, I had quit the college for this program. It was not so good maintaining the two colleges for me. So my question is, can you please guide me, or can you please show me the way so that I can please guide me the way to become a good data analyst or get data scientist. Like right now, I have just started this course.
So the kind of check boxes that you would want to tick off, and I say check boxes because these are not like necessary and sufficient conditions. Like it's not like doing these will immediately get you to where you want to go, but doing these is a good first step along the way. So one of the check boxes is trying to join platforms like Kaggle and participating in a few data science related challenges. If that is too much for you, then you probably want to read up on a couple of data science algorithms. So taking some additional online courses might be useful, but for me, I always recommend project-based learning, because that way you have an end goal and it is very easy to measure whether or not you reach that end goal. With coursework, what happens is, one, all of us get very like tired. At some point, you're going to miss a couple of lectures. After that, you're going to be like, well, what was the point? I missed a couple of lectures anyway.
Yeah.
I'll catch up on those later and I'll miss a few more. So it ends up being an infinite loop. As opposed to that, try to do projects. That way you're at least on track. You can measure progress. So that's number two. Number three, as a data scientist, ideally internships help. So if you want to become a data scientist, first try to find data science internships. In that process itself, you will learn about the requirements for a data science intern. And in that process, you will learn like, oh, these are a couple of more checkbox items that I need to fulfill before I can become a good data scientist. So map out your roadmap by working backwards from where you want to be, to find out some common steps that people take along the way. And then obviously your journey will be very different from someone else's journey. So those things will vary by person on a case by case basis. But in general, I think Kaggle, an internship, some projects, some courses, that will be the right sort of steps to take towards becoming a data scientist. I see a couple of yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Thanks.
So
And one,
yes.
yeah, one small doubt. Actually, is there any suggestions for doing, like you have told that we can join PhD after undergrad? So is there any educational route after this course?
That's a good question that you asked. I think I see a couple of related questions in chat as well, so it's good to clarify. So, when I was an undergraduate student, I did not apply for PhD programs. Like I did, I mean, for me, I wouldn't have gotten in. For y'all, I don't know. You'll have to evaluate it on a case by case basis. A couple of things that PhD programs these days require is research experience. So, if you do not already have research experience going in, do not apply for PhD programs, is my take, purely because you don't want to learn research itself by going for a PhD program. You kind of want a slight taste of it beforehand. So either by reading research papers or by like joining forces with your friends and doing some small research projects. I guess I should take that back a little bit. Like I'm not saying don't apply. I'm saying have some research experience before you consider a PhD program, because theoretically or on paper a PhD is supposed to teach you to do research, but these days with the amount of competition out there, you kind of are expected to have some research experience going into the PhD applications process, because it is brutal. Like today, if I applied for a PhD program with my skill set, maybe I would get in. And it's pretty crazy that I have to say that, because I actually have or will have a PhD soon. So it's really hard. The applicants are really talented. So from a practical standpoint, I would very much advise you to have some research experience, ideally maybe a research paper, or having learned about some process of writing a research paper before applying for a PhD program. The mechanistic way of going to apply for PhD programs is try to shortlist a few advisors that you would like to work with. That is only done if you read about the research, you identify areas of your interest, you find that alignment, find the institutes that they are at, and then apply to those institutes for a PhD program instead of the master's program. So it's pretty much the same application process as a master's, with the slight difference that for a PhD, the advisor matters far, far, far more than the institute, because you will be working directly with the advisor and their students and postdocs or lab, and not the institute. For a master's, it's the opposite, where you are mostly in the institute. You're not working with anybody. You're just taking courses, getting your degree, ideally finding a job or figuring out what you want to do after. Maybe you want to do a PhD after that, and then going on to that next thing. But for a PhD, it's very much about who you're working with and not what institute you are at. So I would say institute matters even less for a PhD program than it does for a master's program. Hopefully that gives people some context on that's how you apply for a PhD. Google it, find the right application form for a PhD, find the people at NYU you would want to work with, identify your research interests. And again, that's why research experience is important, because if you haven't done any research in these areas, how will you identify what is your interest? And I will also add that 90% of the time your interests will change. So you also need to have that additional understanding of, okay, so what are my alternate interests that I might want to explore if my primary interest is not what works out? So all of those things said, like I think research experience is kind of a prerequisite. And as a testament to that, I think some people have started pre-doctoral programs, which I'm not a fan of, honestly. You don't want to put people who are going into a stressful degree. A PhD is a stressful degree. You don't want to put them into another additional year of research, but from a practical standpoint, that makes sense for a lot of people to actually do before they go into the PhD. So kind of a trade-off, but either way, hopefully that helped clarify what the process is, because people were asking.
Okay, one last question. So you have
I think
suggested
I
I would, I'd
one last
recommend
piece.
posting it in chat. I can take it in chat because there are 5 people
You
with their
have
hands
you
raised.
have told me one Crazzle platform, right? Can you please suggest some more platforms by which we can boost our chances to getting more understanding or more opportunities?
I'd have to think about that. Off the top of my head, I thought of Kaggle, but Yeah, it would vary by domain and I guess by problem areas, because there are like some finance related platforms, there are some science related platforms. There's Google Summer of Code that you can pursue as like some organizations posting research stuff. But yeah, I'd like to take the next person who's raised their hands, please.
Yeah, okay. Ujjwal.
Good morning, sir. Sir, I had posted my doubt in the chat box. Like my doubt was, can you discuss the impact of your work? Like how does identifying and addressing concerning comments contribute to user well-being? And you just mentioned that it was difficult to address this issue with machine learning. Then how do you adapt to evolving patterns of this online behavior?
Pretty solid question. Thanks for asking that. In short, what we try to do is identify these coordinated networks with the intention of understanding what like potentially harmful networks exist, because a lot of these coordinated networks end up sharing unreliable content or like mis and disinformation once in a while. But most of the time, like they don't share harmful content on the platform. So we can actually use that time to identify these networks, and before they share any harmful content in the future, we kind of limit their activity or mitigate the risks by the platform taking some sort of action. So that answers one side of your question. The other side is again like, how does identifying what mis and disinformation is benefit the user? At the end of the day, a lot of people are a little naive about the internet, and especially with generative AI, and so they believe things that they see online, and believe to the extent where like if people have someone posted a conspiracy theory at some point in 2017, I think, and it blew up so much that someone shot a pizza parlor up because they thought there was a child trafficking ring or something running in the basement. It's called the Pizzagate controversy, and there's a whole Wikipedia page about this. But that was all because someone believed all of the information they were reading from the internet, which I think as a younger generation, we are a little more wary of. But for us, the problem is going to be with ChatGPT, you can generate very convincing content very easily. And you can ask it to generate any kind of content about completely fabricated stuff, and it will convincingly generate that. So in that sense, if anyone can post anything very convincingly on the internet, whom do we trust? So we try to answer that question from the perspective of use the history of activity of that user to develop a kind of trust score for them, or credibility understanding of that account, and act on the accounts at least that are sharing coordinate in a content in a coordinated inauthentic network. At least those people you can monitor to understand like if they participate in sharing harms, then you mitigate that before they actually achieve virality or go really popular and get a lot of exposure to real users on the platform. Does that answer your question?
Ujjwal, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Great. Moving on, Nishant Singh Rajput.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Sir, as many of the people pursuing the degree, their major degree, after class 12, doing their JE, but it is not happening good, and they're pursuing BS degree from IIT Madras after 12. So, can we get a better career or the good job after doing this 4-year degree program? And what is the way that we follow to build a good understanding and the whole thing about the out of the this degree, that we are in the home and doing our degree, that we don't have the knowledge about the field, out of the field, and the talking with the peoples as we are in the foundation level. So what is the way that we build a understanding and the confidence in ourselves that we can do the same and the better than the people doing in the BTech degree in the offline college, and many of the people doing good in their life after this. So how can we do this?
I think you raise a valid point. If I understand correctly, I think there is a difference between an online degree and an offline degree. Even if it's from the
Right.
same institute, there are certain challenges that you face with online degrees, there are certain challenges that you face with offline degrees, and pros and cons of both approaches. My personal
Right.
opinion, and this is more of a general statement because I don't know the specifics of the online degree by IIT Madras, but my general sense is I prefer in-person things to online things. But the other side or the flip side of this is I've now done a bunch of remote internships. And so I have gotten used to getting the value out of these experiences. I know doing things remote causes some sort of Zoom fatigue after a while, but on the upside, it gives you a sort of robust way to grow your network. So you meet a lot more people online. At least you can see a lot more people online compared to you would see in person, like physically in the same space a lot of times. You can use that to your advantage in the sense of connecting with all of them, trying to set up like chats and conversations and just generally like discussing projects, which you might not have had as much in person if you're like a very small classroom of like 10 or 15 people. So the visibility, all of that is to say, you can use technology to your advantage to actually scale up the kinds of things you would do in person by doing those things online. And I fully acknowledge that it's hard to make the most of an online degree, but I think 3 years into COVID, I think we're all slightly more aware of, slightly more empathetic to doing things online. So more people are likely to respond. More people are likely to like look favorably upon you doing things to make the most of this online degree. So it all goes back to my original point of if you're saving that time, just ensure you use that saved time wisely. If same goes for if you have new technology that you can actually exploit to your benefit, to your career's benefit, then go ahead and do that. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Yeah. Next is Ritvik Trivedi.
Hi, Swapneel. I'm Ritvik and I'm in the diploma level at IIT Madras. So it's been 1 year and I'm in the diploma level. It will take me around 3 to 4 more years to complete the degree, and I'll be 31 or 32 by then. So uh, at that age, and going forward to maybe have a PhD in the US or going for a master's. So would age be an obstacle into in terms of getting into data science? So I've done my MBA. So in career wise, if I want to join as a manager somewhere, I can do that. But I'm more inclined towards technology and would want to. But because I'm like 28 and I have options open, so I would want to see that going into the future, what is the scenario like, at least as per your experience, because you're already, I guess, in a place where I would want to be.
That's a really good question. And I think it's a general observation of mine that as Indians, we tend to associate a lot more weight with age than other people do. For context, today in the morning, I met a PhD student who I might live with in Boston when I moved there, who is 35 years old and like in the middle of his PhD. So it's not unheard of to actually do your PhD at a, I guess, start at 28, 29. In fact, that's probably mid range these days because I've seen people who are 35, 36 also pursuing their PhDs. I've seen people in their 40s say they want to pursue a PhD. So there is no age restriction as such. What I would evaluate is the trade-off. So a PhD, if you're getting like a reasonable salary in whatever country you're in, a PhD is going to reduce that salary by at least 5x or four. I mean, again, this depends on years of experience and what those numbers actually are. But in general, PhDs are not very well paid. They are expenses covered, but you won't be making tons of money. So you will be at a stage in life where you are doing education while your friends and like whoever your colleagues are might very well be enjoying their life. So it just from a mental standpoint, you have to be able to deal with that. That's one. Number two, from an opportunities perspective, you might be passing on some really good opportunities. In your case, maybe managing people is a new skill set that you want to develop, or maybe managing people is a good talent that you have already. You might be exploiting that. So I would evaluate in terms of in 4 years or 5 years or 6 years, where would my career be if I just pursued a job versus a PhD? Like, is a PhD necessary in order for you to sort of break through the glass ceiling wherever you want to be? And just because you want to switch to the technical side, it's not necessary that you need a PhD for that. There are other boot camps and programs that train you over shorter periods of time to actually break into tech. So, for example, in the US, there was Bloom Tech, it's called now, I think. Before this, I forget what it was called. Bloom University or Bloom Tech University. Anyway, I think in India there is a pesto.tech, which is like one of these boot camps. And at this point, I'm just giving examples that I've seen on Twitter. So I have no affiliation with these places. I am not claiming that they will give you the results you need. I'm just giving you an example so you can do some market research around these kinds of boot camps, what they offer, and how they kind of help you break into the space. So if just breaking into the space is the goal, you don't need a PhD. But if you like, so evaluate what your end goal is and accordingly think about whether or not you need a PhD. That would be my advice.
Ritvik, I hope that's an answer to your question.
Yeah, I guess that answers my question to an extent, because like I would ultimately want to get into the quantitative finance scene, because like there are a lot of investments which even my family does in that area. So eventually I would want to get there, and I heard that they require a PhD or a certain level of experience to actually get into that side. And yeah, so I'll obviously take a look at other options which Swapneel said, and maybe I'll try to connect later on LinkedIn or in other ways. So yeah, thank you for now. It's, I guess.
Yeah, just a statement to that end, since you gave me that information. I don't think a PhD is a prerequisite. I think it does help. But if the goal is to be a quant, then you definitely don't need a PhD. Like there are master's programs and other sort of ways to break into the quant field. But yeah, I'm not the expert on quant finance, so I will reserve my comments at that. Cool. We can take Shruti. I think so
Shruti,
next.
yeah.
Hello, sir. I did my 12th now. I gave my JE. So I'm getting engineering sciences in ISER Bhopal. Then I'm also getting artificial intelligence and computer science in colleges via CET. So what will be a better thing for me? And I have a cult in software. So my ultimate goal is software, but I am like stuck between that the prestige of ISER will be more valuable to me, or a good course in a good college will be more like PICT and Walchand colleges are where I'm getting computer science and artificial intelligence. So what will be your take over this?
Unfortunately, there often tends to be no right answer to these kinds of questions, like X university versus Y university type of questions. So I prefer not to answer because I'm an expert on neither of those. I have not been to either of those universities, and unfortunately, in this case, I don't have friends who have been to either of those universities. So I probably won't be able to give you good feedback on that. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, but like just a general thing, like ISER is research based thing. It's more on pure sciences, and it's also offering engineering sciences something. And the other college is offering pure software thing, but it's not having that prestige of that of ISER. So over prestige or the core stream. So
I think in this case, I do think ICER might be a better option just because of the opportunities and doors it might open up for you down the line. I don't know the course specifics, like how much flexibility there is, what kind of coursework overlap there is, but that's what I would try to evaluate by talking to someone who is at ICER and asking them this question, because they might have a better sense of what flexibility you might have if you go there. But yeah, if you put a gun to my head, I would say like ICER is a safer bet. That's all. But it's not my life. I'm gambling with it. It's yours. So you are the person to actually make that decision, not me.
thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Next is Arutra. Arutra, are you here? Yeah.
Hi, I'm currently pursuing my foundation degree and I just completed my 12th grade and I'm going to join BTech this year. So my doubt was that, is it necessary that I need to have a computer science degree along with this to pursue ML data science like you did? Or is some core branch enough? Or what are the opportunities with core branches like mechanical or civil? Because I am getting mechanical, civil, and chemical at renowned institutes, but I'm really not sure if it is going to be useful in the longer run. Because if I am to take mechanical at this point, then there's a lot of talk about how everything is going to be automated in the future, and how our course and the way we are taught is going to be irrelevant in the future. So I just wanted to know, is it safer to take computer science ECE and EEE, or is core branch actually going to be useful?
At this point, you're asking me to predict the future, so I definitely can't speak to what is going to be useful and what is not going to be useful in the future. At the same time, I will say that taking mechanical is definitely not going to do you any favors if your ultimate goal is to get into machine learning and AI. There is like a middle ground in terms of electronics and electrical engineering degrees as core branches that you could probably use to get into CS. But if you want to go for CS, try to take a CS course is my general advice. Again, like, and I guess I'll try to discourage questions about X institute versus Y, just because one, I'm not an expert. Two, you have to understand I did my undergrad in 2014 to 2018. Things have changed radically since then, so my advice might not even be relevant. Number three, there are so many online resources available now around everything that are structured enough to actually give you a good introduction independent of what institute you're at. So um, I don't know who started sharing whiteboard, but hi. Back to your question specifically, I guess that's all I would say is, like, if you want to go for CS, stay in a CS stream. Don't expect to make that transition, because that's not an easy transition to make, number one. Number two, you have to jump through so many more hoops. And number three, if it is your passion to do all of these other things, then don't try to just go for machine learning and AI because it seems like it's the fancy new thing that is out there. Like, these things have a sort of overturn window. There's this concept of overturn windows. Just what is popular now is not necessarily going to be popular later. Okay, this window shifts, so it will move to different fields and new fields. And I certainly understand the value of having an AI sort of education, but that doesn't have to be your primary field. If all you want to do is like do better mechanical engineering, you can learn AI on the side and then apply it to mechanical engineering, and you'll be a better mechanical engineer. But again, like, figure out what your end goal is and try to stick to that as much as possible. Your route will already be hard enough because of the whole competition there is around everything these days. So why do you want to make it additionally hard for yourself? Hopefully that helps.
Okay, guys, since this is going on, I really appreciate if you guys can keep your questions towards his ventures and his field. I understand you guys have a lot of questions about the BS degree and how helpful it is if you'll have, if we can apply to other colleges, etc. But since this session was about building a career in data science and ML, and it is kind of more focused on what Sir's research has been throughout his projects. So I would like to keep the questions towards that career build, college. How do I put this? College guidance, etc. can, I guess, wait for a while, because obviously, as he said, it's different for every single person. We can't decide if one university is better for you or not. So I'd appreciate if you guys could keep your questions towards this particular domain of data science, ML, and yeah. Harini, are you here? We'll take a few more questions and then we'll move on to certain questions based on the projects. Yes, Harini.
Hi, I am in my first year of undergrad. So I'm doing electronics, and this is my second semester of this BS degree. So I'm currently well versed in like Python, C, C++, that sort of domain. So I was wondering what skills, languages I could learn you mentioned Django. So apart from that, is there anything that you particularly focus on learning to get into this sort of data science, machine learning field? And apart from that, how would like an MBA factor into all of this? Because that's the popular choice to, go for engineering and MBA. So I was wondering a little bit about that.
Those are good questions. The first thing I will reiterate Kaggle because it seems like the easiest way for people to get started with data science projects. I will also add that there are specific, I guess, deeplearning.ai has some courses, Coursera has some courses, like topic specific courses. So natural language processing or probabilistic graphical models or advanced statistics, which is like the basis of everything in machine learning. Depending on what your interests might be, or especially like if you don't have a set of interests, then you should be open to doing new things. So social networks for me was like a good shift because it was intuitive. I kind of understood it. I had no plan to get into social networks. I just accidentally landed up here. So it just be open to trying out new things and pick a random project in machine learning that you can work towards with your skill set. So you already know Python. So I guess the next step would be try to do a small project in PyTorch, get some familiarity with that, then try to build like a fine-tuned model in PyTorch. So like take a pre-trained model, fine-tune it on some kinds of data sets. Again, like you pick the application area, but I'm just walking you through mechanistically what steps I would think of. And then try to find some research in that area, read some research papers. You probably won't understand any of the research if you've never read a research paper before, and that's completely fine. There are resources on YouTube that explain these papers to you. So you can find those things, try to go through an understanding of what a paper is like what do you take away from this? Again, you might not understand something, so you'll have to spend time Googling some terms, understanding those things. Make notes, try to write down things so that you don't lose track of what you studied. I think that was the most important part of the PhD process. One thing I learned was make notes about everything and anything. When you're meeting with someone, make notes, you'll learn something interesting and have an open mind about things. So those are the two things I will say. And then the pathway I've highlighted, I guess, mechanistically.
Harini, I hope that's an answer to your question. Okay. Lavangi, Mehta. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, guys.
Yes. Good afternoon, sir. My question to you is I am really interested in building a career in technology and especially data science. But my question to you is, I mean, as you said, project building and doing projects is very important. But at the same time, every moment, the entire industry is so radically changing. So, how to balance between reading new things, acquiring new skills, and actually developing them through projects or internships or whatever? So that is my question.
I think that's a good question. For me, I mainly focused on projects. I did not think of like I want to develop a new skill set because for me that was really hard. Like I won't be motivated if I'm just thinking I want to develop new skill set X or Y. Yeah, when I did, yeah. So the times when I did think of that was again when I had a separate end goal, which is I want to teach something and I need to develop this skill set to teach that thing. So for example, advanced statistics was something I taught to students, and as part and parcel of that, I had to build my own notes and like read up the chapters beforehand, understand what the terms meant, what the math means, and those kinds of things. So another thing that I would advise is like try to develop a reading group between friends, because what you're confused about your friend is probably also going to be confused about, and two heads is generally better than one when it comes to trying to figure out what something means. And obviously there are always forums you can post on and try to get the internet's opinion on what it means, and someone will probably help you out. Stuff like Stack Overflow, or even Reddit these days. There are some Reddit channels where like you'll subreddits where you can ask questions around things and people will help you out. So anyway, that's generally my mindset in learning new things is why do I want to learn this? Do I have a motivation to learn it? And then go for the process of learning it. So my advice would be the same, like identify your motivation for learning something before you actually try to learn something. And yes, to Harini's comment in chat, I sort of forgot about the MBA. I haven't done an MBA, but my sense of what an MBA gives you is a path to the management route. So managing people, managing products, managing teams of developers. An MBA, I do not think gives you the technical knowledge to develop AI and data science tools, but it will give you the management experience to guide teams to develop AI and ML tools. But that is not a substitute for actually having that technical knowledge. So a lot of people I know without that technical knowledge found it a bit of a challenge to break into like AI and ML product management. They can do a lot of other product management, but like in order to do AI and ML product management, it would help if you knew more about AI and ML itself. So an MBA is not a route to actually learning about AI and data science. So yeah, it's a good add-on, but it is not the solution. It won't get you into an AI and data science career. And obviously you can always get lucky with like being an MBA product manager of some sort of AI and ML product. But again, that's not a linear road, is all I'll say. Lavangi, let me know if I answered your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, so before we
One
move
second,
on,
Punit.
yeah, Utkarsh.
Guys, we need to understand that it's 3:31 a.m. in New York, and also he's here as an industry expert, not as a career counselor. So if we guys can get the info from his journey and how he went there, what he did, it would be far better than asking if either Bhopal is better or IIT Madras is better. Please.
Yeah, so polite, yeah. So okay, so just a question that I really wanted to ask. So considering the projects that you've done, how difficult was it to get a hold of sensitive data? Because since you said Twitter is one thing where data is publicly available, and there are a lot of web scraping tools. I'm not sure if you did use web scraping tools for all of that, but when it comes to social media, you're talking about how you're trying to get into WhatsApp as well. Now, WhatsApp, obviously, all chats are private. So, how are you trying to get you get a sensitive data, private data, and kind of figure out if there is some misleading information over there?
That's a good question. So a lot of times when you do this kind of research, you have to be very mindful of the kinds of data you're using. So and the prime reason for that I've seen come out is because humans have biases, and so any data collected from human processes will have biases. For example, Amazon, I think at some point had a hiring tool that perpetuated gender-based biases. I may be mistaken here, so I'm not saying that's a fact, but I think maybe that was the case. And I guess the takeaway from that was like, if you have a team full of men who are being hired, and you try to use that to train a machine learning classifier, what it's going to do is just reject women all the time, because all of your data said only men were hired. So if you thoughtlessly kind of apply machine learning and give it all of these features that are gender related or race related or age related or demographic related or finance related, like it's very hard to then track, oh, why did something happen? Because you've inadvertently perpetuated the biases that exist in the data. Now, companies have a number of ways of trying to avoid this kind of situation. The most naive way is withhold all of this information. And that creates different problems of its own, which is like, now you have some issues, but like you might not be able to identify the patterns because you've withheld all that information and you don't actually use that. So there are longer discussions to be had around how biases occur, but I just wanted to give you an example of what you have to be careful about when it comes to training machine learning models on any kind of data that you have. And the second thing, data privacy. Super important topic, especially in the context of GDPR, which says that your on-site data has to be treated, or customer data has to be treated with adequate care. You cannot just left, right, and center collect any kind of data you want from all users of your platform. There are more rules coming out around this. I think the Digital Marketing Act or something it's called in the EU. That's around marketing data and what you can collect and what you can use for certain use cases. So there is regulation on the platform side. what we do try to care about is we don't like reveal IP addresses. We don't reveal like user authentication information. Your passwords have to be encrypted, sort of protected. The access controls have to be put into place. For me personally, like the kind of data I collect from platforms is typically public data only. So there is no concern about like I am collecting private data on individuals because I simply don't have access to it. But I do have to take care of the data that I do collect, which is like set up some sort of access controls around it. You cannot make all of this data public. When you do analysis, you have to reveal only aggregates in your analyses. Like a lot of these platforms have restrictions in that sense. So there are terms of service that you have to adhere to. When it comes to WhatsApp, the reason we're trying to do on-device stuff is because WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted. If we try to take that data and I think send it elsewhere, then that breaks that encryption. So you don't want to take personally identifiable information and send it to other people. At the same time, you do want aggregate analyses. Like if a message has been forwarded multiple times, then you want to be able to identify like what networks it has been forwarded through, because that was the purpose of us building this WhatsApp based tool in the first place. So we're still working on those things, but these are the kinds of questions that we have to ask ourselves and be careful of, because we don't want to end up on the wrong side of platform policies when we do this kind of research.
Okay, something that really jumped at me is also I like, since we use WhatsApp so often, there is this forwarded many times thing, right? When if you're someone is forwarding an article through group chats and a lot of people, it comes as forwarded many times instead of just forwarded. Now maybe some of those are just memes or just fun videos to watch. Some of them would be actually factual, which are true, and it's like urgent information that is going out to people. So how can you probably maybe differentiate, like identify, is it like you actually go through the content, or is it some superficial way of identifying if this is actually factual, it's just fun stuff and let's avoid it?
I think for WhatsApp they had to strike a trade-off, or when they put this restriction in place, I think they studied the dynamics of information spread, and for the most part, like they didn't find or at least they found a lot more harmful behavior that used this forwarding multiple times feature rather than behavior that was actually designed at activism or like positive use cases of sharing relevant information. So in that sense, that limit makes sense because on the whole, it's affecting bad actors more than good actors. It's not like a catch-all policy. So I'm assuming you can still forward stuff to different people manually. It's just the whole forward to multiple people at once kind of restriction that's put into place, to my understanding. So yeah, and it's a perfect example of when, as a platform, you have to make some decision, you have to take a hard call. Like you are still going to limit some good people who want to forward relevant information, but on the whole you might be attacking bad actors more or affecting bad actors more through that one move. And so you kind of have to do it in favor of safety for the users, for the majority of users, while still like affecting a small portion of users who are trying to do positive things.
I guess that's a very accurate answer to that. Thank you. So moving on with the further few questions that we had, then we can go on with a few more questions from the audience. So when you're talking about working with teams on projects, these multiple internships you have done, you're obviously working in a team, you're working with seniors, juniors, etc. So collaborative projects are the way to go. So was there any key thing that was required to get you through this collaborative projects, or anything you really wanted to understand before you start working with a team? Because obviously in that kind of a group setting, people know at your level or more than you, like you said. So how did you go about settling in with such a crowd where everyone does have a very unique brain?
So it depends very much, right? On some projects it was made actually before projects start, they usually define roles and responsibilities. So for me, I've been the lead on most of the projects I participated in. So I had to define who would contribute what kind of things and then work with them to actually execute that agenda. For me, the challenge when it comes to collaboration has been the documentation side of things. So I guess the best example is this research collective of students that I've been running for a while. So, and again, for context, back in 2017, I started a student club to teach software engineering and programming to students. And it's called Unicode, and that's been running by itself basically, because we trained students to train their juniors, and that became a pipeline. So every year, new students become the mentors, and they teach new incoming students programming and stuff like that. 2 3 years in, I started my PhD. I was like, I can now teach research. So I started a research group for that. So I started teaching people how to do research, teaching them advanced statistics. We taught a machine learning course. That was the one Google funded us for. 1 year into that, they were like, okay, we can do research now. Let's pick some areas and like write a paper together. So we started writing research papers together. So I think we have 2 or 3 papers in the pipeline now. So for me, that collaboration aspect has always been there. It's more about, and it's become more fine-tuned with every iteration. And so now I understand, like before research, like you have to define these roles and responsibilities very well. You have to define deliverables, milestones, a timeline for it, kind of some research related questions like, what is this research question? What are we answering really? What has been done already? How is our research kind of different from the others? And then why is this important, like as a problem itself, why is this important to solve? So identifying those kinds of pieces of the puzzle makes it easy to execute, because now we know these pieces, and the question, the only thing left is trying to answer all of them, put them together into a nice looking puzzle. Documentation, I raise that point because a lot of times, practically speaking, especially in student projects, you will start off with a large group of people, you will end up with a much smaller group of people. And so people take on roles and responsibilities, but they might not be able to execute for whatever reasons, for actual serious things like constraints, or like family or something happened and you had to drop off, or you just weren't interested anymore in those things. So one thing I learned very well was, whatever someone does, have them document it in a reproducible way. Even if it's something as simple as like 5 lines in a Google Doc, with links or whatever, that's enough. Have people work in a way that is usable by the next person without that person being there. That makes it much more efficient. Even when people leave a team, or new people try to join a team, they have something in hand to guide them through the process, as opposed to entering a project blind, not knowing what to do, getting lost, not being able to reach out to other people. Some people are shy, some people are just tired, some people don't have the incentive to start reaching out. It's just a whole mental load that you take off their head and make it very easy for them to contribute. And that has been like really useful, because now people can contribute much faster, much easier. Like I said, we started with analyzing Twitter, but we were very quickly able to build out efforts on YouTube, WhatsApp, Truth Social, Telegram, something called Blue Sky, which is like a Twitter but a decentralized version of Twitter. So that process of collaboration becomes easier over time, but you have to learn about these individual pieces before it gets to that point.
Yeah, I guess that kind of gives an outline to how you really have to work with a team, especially in a very working professional environment kind of a way. Like it, since it is about research, I am guessing similar comes in corporate, but yeah, that's a very different setting. So a follow back on my question that I asked previously when we talked about WhatsApp. So now obviously you see those highlights that come on WhatsApp, right? Your data is encrypted. It's not shared with anyone else. When you're talking about chats, it's between me and the other person I'm talking to. And like you said, there are policies that are followed, and you obviously don't want to get in the way of that. So how would you still try to come about it? I don't know if I'm repeating the question, but yeah, like since that pop-up does come in WhatsApp pretty clearly, I would find it weird if someone is actually getting a hold of my chats. So how does that happen?
Absolutely. So there are ways that you can get access to people with consent. So you go through an institutional review board, which is like someone verifies if your research design is appropriate. You go through nonprofit partners. In our case, we don't just approach random people and say, give us your WhatsApp data. What we do is we go to the nonprofits that are actually giving them services. We carve out use cases where we are helping the nonprofit. And so the software development side is kind of baked into this goal of actually helping a nonprofit, as opposed to we want to just collect your data for research. because that's a really bad pitch. Like I can't, if I came up and told all of you, give me your WhatsApp data, I want to do some research, you would be like, why? Who are you? What do I don't care. No, I'm not going to give it to you. But if it's a non-profit that you've been benefiting from, they are giving these free healthcare services to people, and we can help those nonprofits understand how healthcare mis and disinformation is spreading on WhatsApp groups. That becomes a very strong hook. That becomes an easy, explainable research design to those people, as well as the institutes that actually review what we are doing research into. And so that becomes a way for us to build out our systems with a concrete end goal in mind. Does that make sense?
I'm on it. Okay, yeah, it does make sense. Exactly, it really makes sense. Okay, so I actually considering what Utkarsh did say, I know we have been keeping you for too long. It has already been 1 hour 20 minutes, so and it's late for you as well. I would like to wrap this up pretty quick. I know there are a lot of questions in the chat. Mostly are obviously, how do I enter a data science field? How do you know if this course is better or that course is better? But mainly, what I guess I'm expecting, apart from guys who have actually have questions based on source research and projects, I guess most of them are expecting some advice on how do we actually go about this, like a data science career, because this has just started coming up, data science, especially in India, like considering data science is just a new thing and it's finally taking shape, like new and new courses coming in. And you being in New York, I guess it was already there for you, if I'm right. Data science was a big thing over there, ML, AI, maybe. I'm not sure if I'm getting to the point here, but basically, how do I put? Okay, I'm so sorry, I'm at a loss of words right now. What would be the best way to actually get into the stream, data science ML? Because you have done your way of doing it, accidentally getting into a PhD program, obviously doing the extra things about it. But in general, if you can just give a small guidance of since I can call you a data scientist, right? Can I call you a data scientist? Yes.
You can.
So yeah, I can call you a data scientist. So how would you get into that form? Because I guess that's the question most people want an idea about.
For me, it's been through projects step by step. Like initially, I did no data science at all. Like I had no data science projects. I just built web apps. For me, web apps became a way to start understanding the user-facing side of these kinds of systems. Systems design helped me build better data collection mechanisms. By the time I understood data, I was like, okay, I know this cool thing called machine learning. That became a hook into machine learning projects, and I did my first machine learning project, which was pretty stupid. I used a bunch of different algorithms already present in scikit-learn, but I built a nice deck around, like a slide deck around visual, like what each of these algorithms means, what are they doing, the same use case, the same data set, different algorithms applied to it. So stuff like that created an exploration pathway for me to get into data science from the, like, with the understanding that I actually like this. It wasn't like I was getting into it because it was cool. It wasn't that I was getting into it because like I wanted to. It was just that I took a series of steps that led me there. And most of those were choices that I made. So yes, I was kind of choosing to get into data science, but it was also based on a concrete motivation that, oh, this is what I need for my project. Like it wasn't like, like a hammer and nail problem. You're not like walking around with this hammer of data science looking for a nail, but you actually have a nail of like, hey, I want to understand like how people spread information on WhatsApp, and I need data science to understand that. Or like even simpler stuff, like I want to understand like how to classify a sentiment for a piece of text, and I need data science tools to do that. So think about the needs before you actually go into like why I want to get into a certain field, because that way you are much more motivated. You also have a convincing argument for people who ask you like how to get into data science, or who ask you why you want to get in, and you will be able to find the right opportunities, because a lot of times you are lost and you're like, I will take anything. And that's not a good approach if you're limiting yourself narrowly to a certain set of opportunities, and then you're like, no, I forget this, I will take anything, and then you're not happy with the process. So as opposed to that, like take a series of motivated steps towards getting into data science, that would be my advice.
Thank you so much. I guess, and I hope that helps a lot of people here who are trying to enter that field. So guys, I am sorry, but I'll have to cut this event, right? We'll have to end this soon because sir, I was actually not well, and considering he is on a very different time zone, that is 3:30 a.m. in the middle of the night. I would really appreciate you coming up for this, sir. I am really thankful that you did take the time for this. I know we had back and forth with the timing of the event. I'm so sorry that actually happened, but I'm really appreciate you turning up at 2:30 a.m. for this. I hope you do get well soon, guys. I was thinking maybe we can, I know there are a lot of questions. We can run a form, we can get a few questions. Maybe we can send it to sir if he'll be able to answer a few in a few days' time, and then we'll get back to you. I hope that's okay with you, sir, if it would be possible. We can send you some questions that we weren't able to answer over here, and maybe you can respond to those. So at least these students get to have an idea from the real world perspective as well. And we'll obviously take a feedback from you guys. You guys can connect to him on LinkedIn as well. Sir did share his LinkedIn URL over here. So Utkarsh, do you want to give an ending note?
Hello, Mr. Swapneel. I'm Utkarsh. Actually, I and he contacted you. We were the main people along with Gunneet who actually thought that we should conduct an event where an industry expert comes and gives his insight about the things that he has done to reach where he is right now. And Gunneet, he told me that you were feverish and yet you decided to come at 3:30 because you just wanted this to be a huge thing. So I'm really thankful for that, sir. Matlab, it's like nobody does that, and you doing it without any profit. It's a huge thing. So, sir, really thankful for that. And also sorry for disturbing you this late at night. Like it 3:30 is a huge thing. And also while you are feverish. So thank you for that, sir.
I should clarify. I'm not feverish. I've just had a hectic week and a bunch of headaches, but hopefully, fever doesn't come through. If I was
Okay.
feverish, I would not be doing this, honestly. Like that's not a good I don't want to set an example for like people saying you should do these kinds of things. Like this is not a good idea. Prioritize your health and your mental health over anything else.
Yeah,
That was a
totally.
miscommunication, Parul, then. But
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
you taking out time for us is a really big thing. So thank you.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So I guess we can close this session, guys. We don't worry if you guys have missed out on any questions. We will be taking up on those, and we'll forward it to sir so that he can answer it. And as I said, he did forward a few links. So those resources you were talking about, sir, if you do share it with Utkarsh or here, we'll try to send it out to people so that it benefits them as well. Yeah, guys. So thank you so much for joining. I know it's an abrupt end, but we really have to end. Thank you, guys.
Sorry, one
Yeah.
closing statement. I think a couple
Sure.
of people have been asking like follow-ups and stuff. So I run a student organization where we basically get together and do collective research. We are always looking for people to kind of join in and take on like I said, we do social networks research and there are n number of social networks out there. So as long as you have some sort of interest, number one, and two, I think at this point we're also looking for someone with strong technical backgrounds. Like you should know Python or you should be able to like understand what a Jupyter notebook is, or just like write some basic code in Python to collect data, understand what an API is, stuff like that. As long as that is something you're knowledgeable about and you're interested in doing research into, say, social networks or text or NLP, stuff like that. We've had people work on graphs, graph neural networks, stuff like that. Again, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, add a note to explain why you're reaching out, and I can share some materials with you to read up more about what we're doing. And if that interests you, then we could find a way to collaborate. So that is one concrete action item you can take away if you want to work on social networks.
Thank you, sir. Okay, guys. So let's end this session here. We have this on YouTube live, so if you guys want to watch again, if you did enter it late, we'll share the YouTube link again so that you guys can watch it from the start. It has been a really amazing session. We'll be obviously taking a feedback as well. Mahesh sir, are you here? Can we stop the live sharing? Mahesh sir?
Gurmeet, you are the host. You can stop it. Mahesh is not
Okay,
here.
fine. Yeah, I'll stop it.